Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Okay, friends, this being the Uposatha, the Buddha allowed that the monks may speak on Dhamma. And so, yeah, it's been a little while. I think we did one of these during the summer, but otherwise it's been most of the year, I think. In fact, the entirety of the year since doing the Uposathas. But this is a really good practice, and I think where it's possible, it's very easy and foundational, yeah, to just take one day, and one day out of every 2 weeks is not asking too much, but to set that day, allow that day for attention to our sila, attention to our practice, the seeding the mind with points of reflection, yeah, dhammas to be contemplated, and that effort, that seeding, will carry on through the coming period, whether however long it may be, until we get the next chance to practice or to study or to consider. So this night I'd like to speak on a Dhamma subject that I've been thinking on the last couple of days. Might be of any interest or use in your practice. If not, you can set it on the back burner. It'll come up eventually, but may not be what you're focusing on right now. And if that's the case, yeah, there's so many good dhammas, and just set it to the side. But what I like to speak of is something called conceit, or Māna in Pali. And this is something that in the Pali Canon, it comes up in a bunch of different places, but um, yeah, it's considered to be a loftier fetter, a more subtle fetter, a mental fetter. This is something that it isn't the nuts and bolts, the foundational stuff of, hey, don't kill people, but more like the subtleties of the way the mind works and the way that our suffering is constructed through invisible views and activities. And conceit comes up most notably in the list of the 10 fetters. So we have these 5 lower fetters, like sense desire, ill will, self-view, right, attachment to rites and rituals, and doubt in the Dhamma. These are the lower fetters that keep us bound to the sensual realm. But then there's higher fetters, which are which keep us bound to samsara. And fetter literally means that which binds us, that which holds us, like a rope or a chain. So conceit is up there. It's number 8. Yeah, so it's considered to be a very subtle thing, part of the mind. But what is it? I've been thinking about it because actually it comes up so much that we may be encouraged to just ignore it. Yeah, sometimes it can be like our nose. Yeah, we just get so used to looking past it at what we're focused on, that to stop and actually survey it is kind of weird. Yeah, it's so foundational to the way that we see the world. It's literally always there, that to imagine a world without it would be jarring in a way. And the Buddha uses the word conceit in the same way that we use it in the English language. It's this thing that it's not, this is not different from the way that we use it in the English language. If you crack open a dictionary, the word conceit, I think literally means something like excessive pride in oneself. Yeah, our self-obsession. It means to be self-centered, right? The Buddha used it just as easily and freely as we use it in the English language. Like, we know this is a bad thing. If somebody said that person's really conceited, we wouldn't be like, oh, good for them. Yeah. We'd be like, wow, I should steer clear of that person. That's I mean, that's it's worse than a chicken pox, right? It's like, chicken pox you get over after a couple of weeks, but conceit can last a whole lifetime. Yeah, it can create all sorts of suffering. Though the Buddhist approach to this it's a little different because it's based on a foundational viewpoint, right? So the Buddha uses this turn of phrase, asmi hamasmi, I making, mind making, and this is the basis of the Buddhist idea, the fetter of conceit, is that it is these activities which create the self, and by extension, which create the other. It's happening at the same time. Because again, there is no foundational, clear-cut, stable, static self. It doesn't. They don't exist. They are constructions of the mind. So in some ways, we can try to avoid thinking about ourselves by obsessing about another person, but that's no different. Yeah. And so the definition wouldn't necessarily be excessive pride in oneself, but is rather all of those things which are creating of self, all of those activities which create self, either through dwelling on ourself, our viewpoints, or dwelling on others, our relationship to others, or even saying, this is mine, which is to say, it's not yours because it's mine. Therefore, I exist because it's my thing. Yeah. All of these are activities. Now, self, right? Uh, there is another fetter, the 10th fetter, the most subtle fetter, the root from which all of the fetters, all of the problems, all of the greed, hatred, and delusion is derived, and that is ignorance, not knowing. And we kind of know that this involves self, right? Like this insight into anatta, or not self, helps us destroy ignorance. So how is conceit different than that? And that because that's important to point out. How is conceit less subtle than ignorance? And this may involve thinking back, because many of you have now, if you're listening to a Dhamma talk, probably you've been exposed to the idea that self-centeredness, creating the idea of a self, is it a problem? Yeah, it creates the basis for suffering. Our form doesn't suffer, our memories don't suffer, our consciousness does not suffer. It is only a being formed of the collaboration of all these things that identifies itself as a self, which can suffer. If we remove that idea of self, there is no basis for suffering, because what would be suffering? The aggregates are not suffering. Yeah. Only an idea of a being, of a self, can suffer. So we may have to think back to a time before we were exposed to this idea. Think back to a time, that murky time that comes before we were introduced to the Buddha Dhamma. I remember a time when I really thought this was about me, that something would happen, and I'm like, this is about me somehow, right? Or the only times I would get away from thinking it's like this has something to do with me was when I was so obsessed thinking about another person, it was actually selfish. It's like I was refusing to see them because I was saying they are like this, they are always like this, why are they always like this? Yeah, we have many ways of keeping this self view intact. Yeah, this idea of selves. And if you remember back, it was probably so pervasive that you couldn't imagine it not being there. It was just how you lived your life. It was how you related to the world. You would open the newspaper, or maybe they don't open newspapers anymore. You were scrolling the newspaper and you were saying, that's a problem, and that's a problem, and this is because of this, and that's because of that. And it was just the way the world worked, right? That is ignorance. Our entire society, our entire culture, our languages, our social constructions are all built on the idea of static selves, souls existing and migrating from one existence to another existence and being continuous, stable things, these beings. Yeah, that is ignorance. And that is something which I mean is so subtle. It's like, how do you not have that? That's that involves a dramatically different viewpoint on phenomena, not just the world, but moment to moment arising and ceasing phenomena. Now, that is ignorance, and it's very passive in a way because it's already in place by the time consciousness arises. Yeah, yeah. Our ignorance is causes and conditions playing out. To get over ignorance, we can't just decide in the moment, hey, I'm not going to be ignorant. I'm not going to think in terms of a self. If we find ourselves thinking in terms of a self, we're already doing it. Yeah. Consciousness arose in a certain way based on our volitional activities and the way that we've been habitually viewing the world. So that's ignorance. It's like, it's a passive thing. What is conceit? What is Māna? It is all of these things which we then actively do to reinforce this sense of self. And this is where I say it can be something that's really worth looking at from time to time or becoming sensitive to, because these we do in the moment. Now, it's subtle though, and it's pervasive. It's like we do it a lot. But because it's something we do, it's something we can, in moment to moment, catch ourselves doing, and we can hear ourselves doing. We can try to conceptualize what it'd be to not do that. Like, wait, that's maybe I don't have to relate to the world like that. Maybe I don't have to think that way. Maybe I don't have to talk that way. Maybe I don't have to reinforce these patterns. Yeah? And this is why the Buddha uses this construction, asmi hamasmi, the I making, the mind making. It is a making, it is a doing, it is a constructing. Basically, this is where we put in these patterns of thinking. This is where we create them that lead to us relating to the world and acting in the world as though it's beings, it's static things that are predictable and definable and continuous, always the same, and not embracing this reality of change, of suffering, of not self, the nature of all phenomena. But what does it look like? Well, in some ways, again, it's really it's like our nose. Yeah, as the Buddha said, conceit, this I making, mind making, is a problem. Don't do it. And then it's like, oh, okay, but it is. He understands that he is suggesting something which is profound, right? How do we not create a self? What would that what like, I don't understand. I would just be sitting here, right? I'd just be breathing or something, or chanting Om, or I don't see how I could operate in the world and get from point A to point B and feed myself without having the idea of a self. And it's going to take time. It's going to take thinking and considering. But it is since it is a doing, it's like maybe we can think of it. The Buddha points it out to us, and we already know. Like when we say that person is conceited, we know that that is suffering for themselves. It's not pleasant. You definitely become um, people distance themselves from you, or they complain about it. It's not pleasant for others. It's not good for society when people are conceited or self-centered. Yeah. So it's tangible suffering. Now the Buddha is saying there is a cause for that conceit, which you see in people's actions and speech. Yeah. And it is mental patterns. Any way that we say, this is me, this is mine, this is who I am, this is myself. Yeah. Any way that we identify with something, any way that we cling to something, we say, no, this really needs to be here. This is essential. Any way that we crave something, we prefer something, saying, yeah, I'm all about that. This, I really like that. I'm that, I need that. I want that. That's for me. Yeah. All of that is I making. Yeah. What is at its core? Me, what I want, what I have, what I need. that is a thing, that is a doing, that is that's a volitional activity, and we can catch ourselves doing that. And then then it's up to us to start to bring up the question. And this, I find that this is the most effective way to move into new states of mind, is to start asking the question, like, what would it be without that? The answer will shock us. The answer will be something we have never experienced before. But it is a lot like coming to see our nose, and then realizing that we can actually, it doesn't have to throw us off. Yeah, we can include it in the picture and not like do mental gymnastics to ignore it. But we say, okay, yeah, it's there. Oh, it's there. It's there. Conceit is there, and it's there, and it's there. Now, many of you are probably familiar with construction that's been created. And if you look around, I'm pretty sure that this mostly comes from the commentaries. And when conceit or Māna is described as a fetter, often there's a 9-part matrix that's described. And I know I've brought it up for the group before. And this matrix is being better, one believes I am better. Being better, one believes I am equal. Being better, one believes I am inferior. Being equal, one believes I'm better. Being equal, one believes I'm equal. Being equal, one believes I am inferior. And being inferior, one believes I am better. Being inferior, one believes I'm equal. Being inferior, one believes I am inferior. And this construction, yeah, it's not necessarily from the Buddha, though it is derived. There is one sutta, let's see, Samyutta Nikaya 2249, where the Buddha is talking to someone named Sona. And the Buddha talks about how people can go through the world and they can be like, I'm superior, I'm equal, I'm inferior. And he said, how could they do this and say that they are truly seeing things as they are? Because there is just form, there is just feeling, there is just perception, there is just sankharas, there's just consciousness. How could they, how could they say this is superior, this is equal, this is inferior? In a lot of ways, it's a very useful, skillful means for um, starting to try to unpack this idea. Basically, anything where we're thinking in relational terms is by definition creating of a self, is creating of an other, is creating a dissonance, because it's refusing to see things as they are. And it's very notable and often shocking when you have that insight. It's like, wait, even if I'm equal, believing I'm equal is still this fetter. Even if I'm inferior and I know it and I believe it, even that's still a problem. Even if I'm better and I think I'm inferior as a intentional modesty thing, even that's still a problem. And it's any which way that you undertake this sort of relational gymnastics in the mind, it's missing the point. Yeah, and we can see this, many ways. It's the basis of a lot of the things that I think we all agree are a problem in society. We say, "Oh, that's the wrong way. This is the right way," or that country, they're doing it weird, or that culture, they're doing it weird. They don't quite get it. They're backwards. They're third world. There's patriarchy. There's this idea that men are better than women. And there's militant feminism. There's this idea that men are crap and women are great. And there's these ideas of like equality, where it's like we're all the same. And a wise person would be like, sure doesn't look like we're all the same. But it looks like there's a lot of diversity, actually. So people saying, there is diversity. And you'd be like, yeah, okay, yeah, that's right. And you have people that are like, we're all the same. And you'd be like, yeah, okay, yeah, yeah. This is what we do. It's like in the human world, we're often like, we find ourselves caught between these dualities and we're like, oh no, I have to choose a side. And the Buddha is essentially saying, no, no, any of those are going to create problems. Yeah. I'm really encouraging you not to take a side, because to take a side, you would have to disregard the things that are on the other side, but many of them are probably still valid. Yeah. All of this relational stuff is missing the point. And, you know, it's not necessarily helpful to say that these things don't exist. The Buddha says conceit is a problem. Furthermore, he says, you all got it. Now, at the time the Buddha was saying it, it was, he was able to say things like the Tathagata, the Buddha, is the best of living beings. And it wasn't conceited in the way that we use it in the English language, because he really couldn't find anybody who was better to him. Because the thing was, he was not an immodest guy. He was realistic. If he found somebody who was better than him, he would have been delighted. He would have gone up to the guy and bowed down to him. And in fact, when he realized he was the best of living beings, the most intelligent, most wise, the most accomplished, with this incredible wealth of good karma, he was momentarily miserable. He's like, this is a disaster. I have nobody to look up to. I'm going to be unhappy for the rest of my life. But then he realized, wait, no, Dhamma, this universal truth predated me. I've just woken up to it. Maybe I can take the Dhamma as my teacher, the Dhamma as my guide. I can have reverence for the Dhamma. And then he's like, okay, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be happy. This is not, it's not so bad. Yeah. And none of this was from this relational mind state. And yet we can often see this cropping up everywhere. Yeah. And even in Buddhism itself. So we often talk and we point out the differences in the tradition as Buddhism has been taken into different cultures. And you have the Mahayana, and you have the Theravada, and you have the Vajrayana, and each one you'll find these threads where people saying, well, that's the wrong way. We're keeping to the right way, and for different reasons. The Theravadins are saying this is the right way. We're staying with what was taught. And the Mahayanas are saying this is the right way. We're adapting to the change of circumstances, and we're letting in the new good dharma that was meant to arise. And you know, it's like either everybody's wrong or everybody's right, or we just have to sidestep the whole thing. And it can be disconcerting when we encounter these threads, even in the Dhamma, even in like a monastic society. We were like, why is it so hierarchical? Why is it so seemingly patriarchal? Why is it seemingly so outdated in its modalities? And we would say, well, there must be something fundamentally wrong with the way it's set up. And I would say not so. Yeah, I've spent time in many monasteries, so over a dozen across North America. And there's one thing I say: there's no problem with the Dhamma, but the Buddha said we all got conceit, and you really get to see it. It's not that the fundamentals of the teaching are wrong, it's that we are not yet enlightened. And the societies we create are not yet enlightened. And the way that we interpret the Dhamma is not yet enlightened. No words that come out of my mouth are going to be absolutely faultless in terms of like subtle ideas and conceits. So well, but we're all in the same boat, yeah. And in some ways, that's what makes this okay. It's not that we have to be pure, because when the Buddha talks about the I making and mind making, he also talks about the underlying tendency to conceit. And conceit is one of these things that has underlying tendencies. So because it is so essential, we can pretty much assume that even if we momentarily or temporarily or for a period eliminate it from our mind, we find that we're just sitting in a group of people and we're not thinking, oh, I'm better than him, or wow, he doesn't chant so good, or I really don't, what are they wearing? We're not thinking any of that, and we're just being, and we're just relaxing. And anytime we find ourselves like that, nevertheless, there is this underlying tendency for this to arise. Why? Because again, we were born with ignorance. We were born with this capacity and it's like a fertile soil, yeah. And if we were to take a pot of fertile soil, yeah, nice good potting soil, and we were to put it outside in the yard and just leave it there, we don't plant anything in it, but it's just fertile soil, and we would be like, okay, yeah, it's going to stay soil, and I'll come back to it when I want, and I'll plant something in it. And anybody who's done it was ever done anything with plants, no, it's going to be a couple of days and something's going to be growing in your fertile soil, not because you put it there, but because there's all kinds of like little seeds and mold spores and all sorts of things floating through the air. They want a place to grow, and when they find it, they're going to grow. It's just that easy. It's just that straightforward. And our mind is the same way, because it was born from ignorance. Until we are fully enlightened, there will be this underlying tendency to think in terms of a self, to think. And one monk, the Venerable Khemaka, in a very nice sutta in the Samyutta Nikaya, is a non-returner. Yeah, so he's, the he's in the last phase of practice before arhatship, full enlightenment. And there are these elders who know that he's a non-returner, and they're not that far yet. And so they kind of have this funny exchange where they're trying to ask him, like, hey, what's it like? And they're like, so do you think in terms of a self? Like, do you identify yourself as your form, or your feeling, or your perceptions, or your sankharas, or your consciousness? And he's like, no, I don't think any of these things are the self. And it's like, so you're enlightened? And he's like, no, I'm not fully enlightened. And they're like, well, look, you said you don't think in terms of a self, but you also say you're not fully enlightened. How could this be? And he said, well, look, yeah, you take a flower, right? And the flower has a scent, yeah? You're like, yeah, flower has a scent. And if this is a little esoteric for you, it's like people were really into flowers back then. They didn't have TV, they didn't have the internet. Like smelly things were really important, yeah? Fragrances were really important. But where does the smell of the flower come from? Does it come from the petals? Does it come from the stamens? Does it come from the stem? Does it come from the leaves? And the monks are like, well, no. It comes from all of that. It comes from the flower. Like all of these things smell like the flower. And the Venerable Khemaka said the same. He said, look, it's not that I'm actively, thinking in any given time. This form is myself, or feeling is myself, or perception is myself. But nevertheless, there remains this underlying tendency, this fragrance of self that permeates everything. And I can't really say where it is. And it was very notable that in the process of this discourse and this explanation, the Venerable Khemaka actually attains enlightenment. Yeah, because this was such a subtle thing, so like in his face, that he had never thought to put it to words. He had never thought to try to understand what it was he was going through. And once he did, he realized, wait, that means it doesn't actually exist. It only exists as a tendency. Like this whole time I've been trying to figure out where it is, and yet it's just that it can come up, and that is its own form of suffering. That is its own danger. And in that realization, the restlessness and the ignorance all fell away. Yeah. And so we can find a way out of selfishness, self-centeredness, self-view, conceit. Yeah, it's not that it's always there. So the light at the end of the tunnel is, in a way, a lot of the things that we're already doing in essential Buddhist practice. And so we can start to see the way that our basic practices are already chipping away at this. And this can help point out to us the ways that conceit is already arising in a lot of ways, and catch it and see it as a problem and start to deal with it. So when like when we think in terms of the basic nature of the body, the anatomical nature of the body, this is what's called a subha practice. Yeah, a lot of people are like, well, I don't do that, but you all know that this my favorite practice. Yeah. And why? As I always talk very glowingly, is like, for me, it's a great equalizer. And it's a lot of ways that the Buddha is saying, well, anybody who thinks I am better, or I am equal, or I am inferior, is not seeing the form as it really is. Likewise, anybody who sees a body can't look at another body and say, my body's better. No, they can't look at another one and say, yeah, we're about the same. I could take them. They can't look at another body and say, it's like, oh, wouldn't want to be like that. Because if you really look at the body, all you get is, wow, we're all in a pickle. This is a mess. Yeah. Because you get bodies, you understand bodies, you see their frailty. And at the same time, you see the miracle that they work, that they continue to work. There's this idea of intelligent design. You know, the people who have this viewpoint of intelligent design say that there must be a God, because if you look at incredibly complex structures like the iris of the eye, you know, or cellular structures, or the way that everything fits in this package somehow, and there's room for it all. It must have been intelligently designed. And to me, this is completely backwards. Like, when somebody intelligent is designing something, they try to make it simple, right? They don't put little tubes going every which way. This one carries bile, and this one carries blood, and this one carries nerve impulses, and this one carries hormones. They wouldn't do that. They would try to find a better way of doing this. It wouldn't be so complicated. For me, the very complexity of it is like, we were talking about the nature of poetic verses in the suttas. It can be actually a mark of authenticity. It is like, the fact that this body is so incredibly complex. It's almost impossible that, yeah, it could work by intention. Yeah, it's just the product of, well, it seems to be working, so let's keep doing it this way, built on up over over a billion years of evolution. It's like, well, it worked long enough to reproduce, so let's keep doing it that way until a better way is found. Yeah. We are the end result, but not the end result. We are just in that cumulative part of this process. But you look at anybody, and we have friends who have undergone surgeries, you know, going to doctors, and we're in the same boat. You look at the body realistically, and you're like, I don't know it. And I mean, I've got joints that are swollen and don't work the same as when I was in my 20s, and never will work that way again. But we're all on this spectrum. Yeah, we're all moving through time, and it's not backwards. We're all gathering experience and scars, and, all these different things, and we're changing constantly. And that's what bodies are. So when you look at them realistically, you can't think this one is better, or this one is equal, or this one is worse. They're all just bodies. Yeah, they're all just in this linear progression through time, wherever they happen to find themselves. Yeah, you can't, there's no comparison that can be made. Yeah. So if you and we, yeah, did that bring anything up? Does it make sense that we're doing this a lot? Yeah. You look at somebody and you think, oh yeah, 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 they're about, we're the same. So why are they fidgeting so much during the sitting? Why are they breathing so hard? We're the same. So why are they having so much difficulty with this? So you see a youngster, and he's like, ah, kids these days. If we remember back when we were youngsters, like, the adults were saying the exact same thing. It's like, it probably, this is the way things are. Yeah. When we practice metta practice, friendliness, compassion practice, yeah, understand, seeing the suffering. When we practice mudita, taking joy in others' joy. When we practice equanimity, understanding that we all are the owners of our own actions and the consequences of those actions. Yeah. You cannot help but find this to be a fantastic equalizer. You before, you can be like, okay, they're that group and we're this group, but we're this country, that's that country, and it's like, we're better, we're equal, or worse, and you hear these coming up all of the time. And this is a very common way of thinking. But and even in our own lives, yeah, we like, oh, I'm a mess. Oh, I can't take it anymore. You hear this every day, and it's often not until you hear somebody else say it, and you're like, don't talk like that. You don't, no, you're good. I'm the one who's a mess. You're fine. Yeah. You realize that any kind person would not want somebody to be beating themselves up that way. And we do it ourselves. Yeah. Once you start to hear it, you start to hear it in others, you start to hear it in yourself. You're like, wait, do I need to do this? Is there any way that this could be accurate? Because it, in our best moments, it's completely irrelevant. Yeah. Yeah, we're having a good day. We held the door for somebody. We helped somebody with their groceries. We pet a dog, and it didn't bite us. It like let us pet its head, and it's wagged its tail, and we're going through the world, and we're like, yeah, everything's good. Yeah, and somebody says you're awful. You're just the worst. What would we do? We'd be like, yeah, whatever. And this is what the Brahma Viharas. This is what metta is like. It's like it has no fertile soil. Yeah, is like everything that's not metta and compassion and mudita and equanimity is the fertile soil for the arising of disparity of view of self and others and comparisons and oh no I'm worse or aha I'm better or we're equal or neck and neck uh, and once we start to practice the Brahma Viharas, it's all just way we're all people. Yeah, we're all just trying to get through this. Yeah, we're all prone to suffering. We're all in samsara. It's the same all the way around. Yeah, and it's a solution for conceit. Yeah, it's not that we had to attack conceit directly. It's not that we had to do the anti-conceit practice. It's not that we had to memorize the list of nine. Because like I said, the Buddha didn't even give that list. It was created after the fact to try to make some sense of all of this. Yeah. So the Buddha said, don't be conceited. and because he said it to beings who weren't enlightened, yeah, we're like, yeah. How conceit? Yes, conceit is a fetter. Like, could you explain that more? And it should be obvious, right? Just don't don't make it about you. And if you were to take on any mantra, it's like this isn't about me. Yeah. But don't let it be about others either. Don't let it be about society. Don't absolve yourself of any responsibility, but just like this just isn't a useful way of thinking. See what's in front of you. Yeah. Just there's form, yes. There's feeling, yeah. Feeling is not suffering, it's just feeling. There's memories, there's constructions, mental constructions, habit patterns and ideas. And then there's consciousness that's arising and ceasing all the time so quickly, so many millions of times a second that we couldn't possibly see it before it's gone. Because the very act of seeing is itself a moment, a blip of consciousness. Yeah. And the time we think we've seen it, it's been there's been, we're a couple million consciousnesses behind the ball. Yeah. And then the anicca sanya, anapanasati, the understanding of the elements, the contemplating the aggregate, seeing the sense bases and how things are conditioned. Yeah. All of these practices are essentially dealing with conceit. Yeah. They give us windows. While we're doing these practices, we are not thinking in terms of self. While we're doing these practices, we're not making a me. We're not making an I. We're not making a mine. Yeah. And so therefore it doesn't exist at that moment. Now we still have to be on guard because that underlying tendency is always going to be there. Yeah. And it could be just until we get to the next change in our little social group or till we get to the next job or to the next hobby where we find suddenly like, oh, I'm bad, or oh, they're bad, or oh, this is great. This is the for the greed types out there. This is the best. This is so much better than what I was doing before. I love this, and it's like yes, all of these are relational, and they're missing the point. Yeah, saying it does not make it so. Yeah, it can still be good without being the best. It can still be good without being better. It can still be good without being, well, the same as what I had before. Yeah. a situation can really never be the worst when you start seeing the world like that, because there will always be potential. Every moment will have this potential, and that's what that is the definition of freedom. Yeah, again, to see this as a shackle, a bond, a chain, something that is dragging us down. Yeah, this relational thinking, this self-centered thinking, is creating the matrix, the structure for our very suffering. Yeah, and in any moment where we're not doing that, we will find that we are not suffering. Yeah, because we haven't made the being, we haven't laid the groundwork for it, so suffering can't arise. And then just to expand that, to make those moments longer, more pervasive, yeah, more the basis of our mind, to catch the little ways that I making and my making continue to crop up, and to pull out those weeds, and to yeah, continue what we're doing. Yeah. So I hope this is useful in some way. I invite you to keep an eye out for it. Yeah. Anytime, anytime you find yourself thinking better, equal, worse, be like, don't do that. And see what it's like. Yeah. Give it a try. You have nothing to lose but your suffering. You know, you can't make things worse. We're already in samsara. Yeah. So but it could actually help, and it could actually make it easier to live where you live, to work where you work, to do what you do. It could really continue to invigorate the basic practices that you're already doing, because you will see tangibly what they are keeping you from, what they are protecting you from. Yeah, many of these meditations are also called guardian meditations. Yeah, this is what they protect you from, something so subtle and yet so destructive. Right? So that, sadhu for coming together again on this Uposatha, and I offer these thoughts for your reflection in the coming fortnight.